Good afternoon and welcome to everybody that's joining us today for this IWFM webinar. Is your facility cyber secure? A deep dive into ISO 27001. My name is Derek O'Boyle, Vice Chair of the IWFM Ireland Committee, and I'm joined here by Ian Christopher, who's the IWFM Partnership Manager, and Govinda Gagan from CG Business Consulting. And we're delighted here to be your hosts today on today's webinar. It's fantastic to see such a strong attendance from across the IWFM committee. Very special welcome to all our colleagues that's dialing in from various other regions and SIGs, our colleagues from Scotland and UK, and we're really looking forward to exploring one of the key topics which is facing us all now in the FM profession as our sector becomes increasingly digitalised and data-driven. By way of introduction, I have a quick slide here on the IWFM Ireland Committee, so you can, if you haven't met us before, you can see our mugshots, so to speak. We have a great mix within the committee from both client and service side of the sector, which truly helps to represent the voice of FM in Ireland and indeed in discussions with our regional partners across IWFM. Appreciate it's been a little while since we've had an event or a webinar. We had some issues with socials and promotion the same, but thankfully we have that resolved with the help of IWFM and Ian. And we're back on track with our webinars and our events for 2026. And we plan to work a lot more closely coming into 26 with our SIGs and our colleagues across Scotland and the UK. So just to give an idea of what we have planned for 2026 for IWFM Ireland, we have webinars on portfolio decarbonisation, TC348 and what that means as it's coming in and transitioning. We've water stewardship programs, WellCert building tours, Uisce Éireann laboratory tours, tour of Bolden Mills, Aviva Stadium tour, and some fantastic webinars around plant room to boardroom, next generation FM leaders, and EPBD and what that really means for the FM and real estate sector over the coming years. So why are we here today? We're here today to focus on ISO 27001, the international standard for information security management, and exploring what it truly means for us in the workplace and facilities management sector. With the acceleration of all our buildings now into smart buildings, with IoT sensors and integrated digital systems now managing everything from access control to energy consumption, information security, unfortunately, is no longer IT's problem. It's very much an FM problem and it's very much an operational resilience problem. So this session today is really about moving beyond the jargon and showing you the robust framework and international standard that it is and how it can protect your assets, secure your client data, and also future-proof your operations against the ever-widening cyber threat landscape. So some of the takeaways you're going to have here by the time Govinda is finished is you'll have the ISO 27001 essentials, risk management strategy, vendor compliance and why it's so important that your vendor supply chain are brought on board with your journey, and the competitive advantage of having ISO 27001. Now, thankfully, to guide us through this complex and crucial topic, we do have Govinda Gagan from CG Business Consulting. CG Business Consulting are leading experts in compliance. They work across Ireland and the UK, across many different sectors. And we're going to be hearing about the critical steps from physical, digital security, and how they help their clients achieve certification. So we're in safe hands today with Govinda. Just before I hand over to Govinda and we kick off the webinar proper, a couple of housekeeping rules. If you are not on mute already, can you please check and ensure you are on mute? This is being recorded, so if you don't want to appear on screen, ensure you have your camera off. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Ian is going to be monitoring the chat for questions. He'll collate them together, and at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A session. So Govinda is going to be presenting for approximately 20 to 25 minutes, which is going to be followed by an 8 to 10 minute Q&A session, which should have us nicely wrapped up by 1:30, and everybody can head for lunch. So really, without further ado, I'm going to hand you across to Govinda, and we will be presenting the CBD code. Ian will have it ready there for the end of the presentation, so you can note it down and add it to your records. So Govinda, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'll stop sharing and you can put your desk.
Thanks, Derek. 1 second, I'll just scroll down. Slow sharing. There we go. Okay, great. Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. We're here today to talk about something that is reshaping the FM profession faster than most people realize: information security. Not IT security, information security. Because the reality is that in 2025, facilities are no longer just physical spaces. They're connected digital ecosystems, and ISO 27001 gives FM leaders the structure to secure those environments. And today we're going to break that down in a way that's practical, FM focused, and immediately useful. So the reality, what's happening now? I want to open with what's happening right now in our world today. These are not hypothetical risks, they're real current FM incidents. So for example, a client CCTV system was hacked this week. Full camera takeover, ransom demand on the screen. This wasn't a Hollywood script, it was a real operational incident. Our finance team are seeing 11 to 12 targeted fraud attempts every month. Invoice redirection, impersonation, fake contractor requests. Attackers are disguising malicious CAFM updates as routine work orders. All it takes is one person under pressure on a Monday morning clicking approve. And on top of all this, AI is making phishing more personalized and more believable than ever before. The question is no longer if your FM operation will be targeted, it is when, and more importantly, how you respond. So why FM is a target? FM is suddenly in the spotlight because FM sit at the crossroads of people, buildings, data, technology, and vendors. Your BMS is connected, your CCTV is connected, your access control is connected, your contractors are connected, and your CAFM system is cloud-based. Your site teams carry data on tablets and mobiles. FM is a data-rich, highly connected, multi-vendor environment. From an attacker's perspective, it's perfect. And with AI lowering the skill required for sophisticated attacks, FM organizations without an information security framework are exposed. So ISO 27001, the foundation. ISO 27001 exists to protect three things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So let's break these down. Confidentiality is essentially only the right people should see sensitive information. So from an FM's perspective, contractor details, access logs, floor plans, as an example. Integrity. Information must be accurate and untampered. In FM world, that's compliance records, maintenance logs, safety checks. And availability. Systems must work when needed. So for an FM, that means a BMS, a CAFM, and a help desk system are available 24/7. ISO 27001 gives you a structured, auditable framework to ensure these three principles across your entire FM operations exist. ISO 27001 controls overview. So just to give you a flavor of the broad scope of the management system, there are 93 controls grouped into 4 categories. One is organizational controls. This consists of governance, asset management, supplier controls. People controls exist with training, awareness, screening, and I guess the employee life cycle from onboarding to offboarding. Physical. Secure areas, equipment access are typical examples of controls needed in that space. And then lastly, technological controls, which is the most comprehensive suite of controls in place. Networking, monitoring, malware, cloud security, for example. So FMs are generally strong at physical controls. The real gaps appear in organizational governance, people awareness, and technological controls. Sorry, keep on there. So, technological controls. There we go. Sorry, next one. So, physical controls, your comfort zone. FM teams excel at physical security, site access controls, visitor and contractor management, RAMs, documents, and ID verification, server room security. But physical controls now extend to digital physical systems. For example, CCTV and BMS running outdated firmware, IoT devices installed without proper configuration, lost or unmanaged mobile devices with access to building systems. Attackers increasingly exploit physical digital overlaps, and ISO 27001 closes those gaps. Organizational controls, the biggest category. This is where most FM organizations struggle. For example, asset management. If you ask most FM teams for a complete list of laptops, servers, mobile software, cloud platforms, and information assets, they simply can't produce it. ISO requires that you can. Data classification. Do you know where your most sensitive data lives? Who has access to it? How it flows between contractors and systems. Policies. GDPR, IT security, AI acceptable use. Policies must exist, be communicated, and be acknowledged. Shadow IT and shadow SaaS, which is software as a service. FM staff and contractors often use unapproved tools like Dropbox, WhatsApp, and personal emails. ISO brings these into a controlled governance environment, and this category is the backbone of the security maturity of the FM system. Supply chain, your biggest vulnerability. FMs rely heavily on contractors and vendors, and this is exactly where attackers strike. A third-party vendor with weak controls become your breach. Under NIS2, if they're compromised, you may have 48 to 72 hours to notify regulators. We're also seeing silent failures, where vendor breaches are breached but are not informing their clients. Your data is impacted, your risk increases, and your clients still hold you responsible. ISO 27000 enforces proper onboarding due diligence, ongoing supplier assessments, controlled offboarding with licensings being revoked, data deleted, access removed, and scenario testing. Can you replace a critical vendor quickly? FMs have hundreds of moving parts, suppliers included. ISO makes those parts secure. People controls, your human firewall. Technology doesn't fail as often as humans do, and FM environments are busy, operationally intense, and full of human touchpoints. Right now, most FM organizations manage security awareness haphazardly. No structured training, no metrics, no accountability. Meanwhile, finance receives a dozen phishing attempts monthly. Attackers use AI to personalize messages. Fake work orders mimic real contractors. Departing staff may exfiltrate data without controls, and structured awareness, where monthly modules, phishing simulation, KPIs is one of the most impactful early wins. Technological controls, the layered defense. FMs now depend on technology stack. For example, with SaaS, with CAFM, HR, accounting, then platform as a service. You're looking at SharePoint, Power Platform. And for OT, you're looking at BMS systems, CCTV, access control, and then IoT with sensors and automated systems. ISO 27001 requires multi-layer email filtering. For example, EDR and MDR for devices, which is looking at things around real-time monitoring. Data loss prevention for internal leakage. This is where we look at classifying our data and label it through sensitivity labels within our platforms. Encryption and secure configuration around our devices. Logs and monitors for accountability. Every system must be recorded, secured, and periodically reviewed. Incident response. When, not if. Incidents will happen. What matters is the quality of your response. Poor response hides issues, delays actions, and damages trust. A strong ISO-aligned response is structured, transparent, and evidence-based. ISO gives a clear 5-step cycle. 1, detect. 2, contain. 3, notify. 4, recover. And 5, learn. And critically, every action requires evidence. When regulators, insurers, or clients ask, show me the logs, ISO ensures that log exists. AI, opportunity and risk. AI is now embedded across FM. from drafting tenders to analyzing reports. But AI has two risks. One, staff over-trusting outputs, and two, sensitive data being entered into unmanaged tools. AI doesn't replace judgment, it amplifies it. A mistake made with AI is made at scale. This leads us to a real case scenario. A case study with Deloitte in Australia. This incident perfectly illustrates the hazards of unguided AI use. Deloitte consultants used GPT Model 4 to draft a client report. They didn't properly validate the content. The AI hallucinated, inventing regulations, frameworks, and references. The report went to the client. It caused major embarrassment and triggered an internal investigation. The lessons for FM is simple. If you cannot stand over every word that leaves your organization, you do not send it out the door. ISO requires AI acceptable use, policies, approval of tools, and human verification. Exactly what was missing in that failure. So ISO 27001's roadmap. So what's involved in actually achieving a management system that's ready for certification? Here's what an FM aligned ISO journey might look like. So number one is quick wins in the first 1 to 3 months. We look at security awareness platforms. We look at basic policy creation and deployment. We look at multi-layer email filtering, MFA everywhere, which is multi-factor authentication on our devices, and then working on asset inventories. Then number two would be our gap analysis. And this happens over a 2 to 4 week period where we review the current state against the controls of the standard, identify weaknesses, define scope and priorities in phase 2. Then we look at implementation. We build policies and procedures, we implement controls, we train the team, and then we conduct internal audits. Once ready then, certification. This is a two-pronged approach with a stage 1 and a stage 2. Stage 1 is essentially a documentation review. And then stage 2 is where there's an operational audit and they actually come in and look for verification against the documented policies and procedures we have in place. And once we achieve that successfully, we have to maintain the system, which is really when the real work starts in terms of governance. We look at surveillance audits, we look at continuous improvements, we look at risk reviews. For most FM organizations, certification is basically a 6 to 12 month project cycle. So FM scenarios map to ISO controls. So I just wanted to give you an idea, I suppose, of the broad scope of what's involved in the system. And it's very much not an IT focused system. It's very much an information focused system. So let's look at at how real incidents align perfectly with these controls. For example, contractor impersonation. That would be aligned with our physical controls, our visitor management, and our contractor verification. Phishing work, or a phishing work order. That would be aligned with our awareness programs and training, our malware protection, and handling of information. Lost devices. This would be tied into our asset inventory, our encryption controls, our mobile device controls, and remote wide process. WhatsApp data leakage. Where would that lie? That would be tied in with our acceptable use policies, our classification of data, and our offboarding of employees and vendors. And lastly, our vendor portal breach. Where would this be tied into? Our supplier controls, our access reviews, and monitoring and logging. So ISO 27001 isn't abstract. It directly prevents the failures FM teams experience every day. So key FM controls. So the most critical ISO 27001 controls that for FM's operations would include asset inventories, which is the foundation for risk assessment and incident response. Information classification. This would identify which FM data is sensitive. Supplier security. This is where we're governing our vendors and we manage the life cycle of those through the onboarding, the monitoring, and exit or offboarding of those vendors. Threat intelligence. Staying aware of all OT and IoT vulnerabilities. Awareness and training. This is the human firewall that's in place to help protect our data. Termination and offboarding, a critical step in the process of ISO 27001, would be the immediate access removal and device recovery. Physical security. This is where controlled access to secure zones would be applicable. Secure disposal. This is where we would prevent residual data from being leaked from the organization and from the relevant systems and platforms. Malware protection. This essentially stops the majority of malicious payloads. Data loss prevention, or DLP as it's known, is this when enabled and deployed, it prevents intentional and unintentional data exfiltration. Monitoring. So we ensure accountability, who accessed what and when. These controls directly address the real-world cyber risks FM teams experience daily. The business case. So this slide brings everything together into a message that resonates strongly with senior FM leaders. Win more business. ISO 27001 is not a qualification criterion in FM procurement. Organizations that can demonstrate mature controls, especially around contractors, OT systems, and supply chain security, gain a competitive advantage. Protect reputation. Incidents are inevitable. What protects your brand is being able to prove that you had robust audited controls in place. ISO 27001 demonstrates due diligence and structured governance. Meet compliance obligations. GDPR, NIS2, insurance requirements, and client contracts increasingly expect evidence of risk management. ISO 27001 aligns perfectly with these obligations. So the key message is ISO 27001 is shifting from a differentiator to an entry-level requirement for FM providers. So next steps. This slide is designed to drive immediate action. Launch a security awareness program. This is the fastest, most cost-effective improvement you can make. People remain the highest risk vector. Build your asset inventory. Devices, platforms, integrations, IoT, OT. If it's not listed, it cannot be secured or audited. Update core policies. IT security, GDPR, AI, acceptable use, data retention. Ensure staff and contractors acknowledge them. Enforce multi-factor everywhere. One of the most impactful controls with no exceptions. Then conduct a gap analysis, a structured 2 to 4 week engagement that gives you a roadmap towards ISO certification. These steps alone reduce risk and prepare your organization for a smoother ISO journey. So I'd just like to say thank you for your time today. I suppose as an FM teams now manage digital buildings, digital supply chain, and digital information flows. Information security is no longer solely an IT responsibility. It is an operational discipline embedded in FM. ISO 27001 gives your organization the frameworks to manage this responsibility responsibly and confidently. So I'd invite attendees to ask practical scenario questions that falls into maybe your remit. And just to highlight, I suppose, information security is everyone's responsibility. Every decision protects your building, your organization, and your people. So I'd encourage everyone to look at I suppose managing the key points of that I just highlighted on the slide deck. Just remind participants that support's available if you require any assistance there. And I'll hand it back to you, Derek.
Thanks very much, Govinda. I'll just go back to sharing my screen now. 2 minutes. No. So, Ian, do we have any questions in the chat that we want to open up the discussion before we move into the final element of the webinar?
We don't at the moment, Derek, but I would encourage any of the attendees, if they've got questions. I'm a great believer, if you don't know the answer, it's not a silly question. So feel free to, if you've got some points, do put them in the chat and we will try and cover as many as we possibly can.
Just a question from me, Govinda. In terms of DLP and data loss prevention, could you expand on that a little bit more? Because when we were chatting during the week, I was probably surprised with the breadth that covers. So maybe if you could just talk us through really what DLP, because it's a very important clause in ISO 27001.
Sure, yeah, and actually, funny you say it, it's probably the most challenging, I would say, control implementation of all of the requirements. I would say most companies, I'd say, are not resistant, but they would be reluctant to deploy it, because they feel that maybe operationally it can be quite a kind of a blocker. What I would say is data loss prevention can be brought into a business in a layered approach. So ultimately, what are we trying to do here? The controls is looking for us to demonstrate that we understand where our sensitive data sits. And we're very much talking about PII here in a lot of cases, okay? We understand which system it sits in, who has access to it. So if we are infiltrated in any way with a hack, with a cyber, we know exactly what systems to shut down immediately. So it gives us a head start maybe on damage limitation. From an implementation point of view, for example, if you're a Microsoft house, how would you go about that? You would essentially look at Microsoft Purview. Now you'll have to excuse Microsoft change these names every 6 months. They're constantly evolving.
Okay.
But Purview is the application where you would deploy sensitivity labels. And what does that mean? You can have a confidential label, restricted, or let's say intercompany, which will be essentially majority of data would sit in that space. And then that just means you apply those labels to relevant SharePoints, and then the relevant people that have access at those label levels with a security group essentially control, or there's a controlled access. Now, what's that mean then? If I take a piece of data and I try and send it to my Gmail account, I am not able to open that email, that piece of information. So ultimately, we are giving confidence to the business, to our customers, and in-house to management and stakeholders that we are essentially deploying, I suppose, adequate controls to essentially protect our most sensitive data and their data as well. So it's very much a customer confidence thing, but as you can imagine, it's near impossible to manage the offboarding of people coming and going to our organization. So it's best in practice. And what I would say is there's a kind of a journey for people to go on. And I would say from a testing point of view, I would say pick a SharePoint that let's say one of the FM groups use internally amongst themselves and play around in there with it and get comfortable. And then we would look at maybe a wider deployment.
Okay. And in terms of vendor management, because I suppose the organization I'm in, we manage quite a substantial amount of vendors across our client portfolio. And I understand when you're going through QEHS, ISO certification, there's very clear frameworks around how you manage your third-party vendors. But that said, it's not completely invasive with the third-party vendors. And what I mean by that is they get issued a questionnaire, they detail the steps they're taking, and it gets sent back, good, bad, or indifferent, and you help them along the journey. Is that the same approach for ISO 27001, or is it a more robust approach in terms of the expectation you'd have on your supply chain?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So I would say it is the most comprehensive suite of controls in that standard. Why? We're all moving, let's say, whether we're in the cloud or well, majority in the cloud, but on-prem or in the cloud, right? Supply chain now has become, I suppose, an integral part of all of our businesses. And what tends to happen is a lot of people are buying licenses for all these lovely systems and they're testing them out. And a lot of companies do not have control around that. And ultimately, what is the standard looking at? We have to demonstrate, firstly, that we've got a vendor management policy in place. Now, it's very much focused from a quality point of view. It's more around, I suppose, the performance of those vendors, and maybe you're looking at things around, best practices. But with security, we're very much interested in understanding how they're protecting our data when they handle it on our behalf. So obviously, there's an engagement in place. A lot of times with these SaaS solutions, we're kind of dictated to in terms of the contracts we get, but very few people actually read those contracts and actually see, is my data sitting in Europe? Is it in the US? Is there confidentiality agreements in place? Is intellectual property protected? So these are the things that will be looked at in a contract from a vendor manager point of view. Once you go
And
through,
that can be down to, from what you explained there during the week when we were chatting, that can be down to simple stuff like even your access control contractor, because you mentioned there's a case study and it's well publicized, so you're not breaking any confidentiality. Was it Omni Hotels or one of those that had a serious breach down to their access readers or something that was,
yeah, like it can
yeah.
happen so easily because again it's down to like I suppose and even like I suppose the old kind of traditional kind of story was the cleaner, in the office, and no one ever vetted the cleaner, but they had access to the building out of hours, and sure they could have brought anybody into the building and infiltrated, confidential documents, and that has been the case. But I suppose things have moved on. I suppose in terms of the cyber world, and I suppose from a kind of a SaaS point of view, access control is so critical, and that's why single sign-on is it's a great control to have when you do deploy it. And I would actually advise people when you are evaluating a vendor to bring in on your tech stack. So a couple of the critical things I would look at is there a native API connection kind of connecting to our main hub, because that means then it actually has a proper connection from a feed point of view. And number two would be like, have we actually evaluated these guys? Have these guys had cyber attacks? Like, what's their performance levels? And this is where NIST 2 is coming into play. So ultimately, like GDPR, if a vendor services us gets hit, like a good example would have been Cloudflare 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
You might have noticed this. So Cloudflare got hit with an attack, and most people had a meltdown because they couldn't get into their ChatGPT accounts and their Claude accounts and all their AI tools. So what ultimately happened? Absolutely, your perfectly third party kind of issue here. They had a third party tool that they have as their ticket support desk. That support desk bot on that account was infiltrated,
So
and
no different
ultimately,
than the ticket support desks we would use across the FM industry.
correct, because they use they thing called an agent. And I don't want to maybe drift into AI too much today, but from an AI point of view, there's AI, and people will know there's custom GBTs, and that's just where you create a set of criteria and you ask a question and it creates a document. Lovely. Agents is where you create a workflow and you ask the agent, can I have my policy details? And they'll normally, because they're standardized questions, and this has been done and trialed over a number of years now with a lot of the call centers and the likes of the pension houses and the healthcare companies. They will essentially go through a routine kind of bot check, but if it's infiltrated in any way, that bot will hallucinate and could go off doing anything. So who's governing that and who's controlling it? So there's massive risk out there. Now, obviously, we're not talking about curing cancer here, but if we are dealing with PII, and then our customers gets just something put out in the dark web or publicly available, they don't care that it's a third party system. They know that we have that system, so we're ultimately responsible. So the first thing I would probably do as a company is to look at our tech stack and condense it down as tightly as we can and have as little as possible data floating around multiple systems unnecessarily. I would say if it has to be done, absolutely, put it in place and have the controls. But that's how I would evaluate that. And lastly, I would say on the supplier kind of controls process, from a monitoring point of view, it's all about risk assessment. Yeah. So I would say, who's a critical high risk vendor? Let's say you've got someone like a HR platform. Typical example, holds all our contracts or our employee data. And we need to evaluate them. If they don't have an ISO 27001 or SOC or those frameworks in place, I would be very much not approving the deployment of that tool in my business, because we have no control over where that data sits, who has access to it on their side, and ultimately we're just everything we do from a security point of view is all risk-based, which will be in the quality, environmental, health and safety world as well, but just we're very much looking at it from a data point of view.
Okay, and I presume that will be exactly the same for BMS systems, BEMS systems, and the other systems that we're using, asset management systems, plant systems.
All the same. I say that to all my clients. I'm not really. If you could be making bars of chocolate or baking steel beams, it's all. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to understand where your data sits, who has access to it, how we control it, and how safe is it. And think of a data lifecycle from when it enters our business into our systems till it sits there, till it's shared, until it's exits our building or it's archived. That's a good way of looking at how to. If you looked at your data and classifying that data in its life cycle, that's a very good start to kind of understand where's the risk in our business here.
Okay, brilliant. Well, if we've no more questions,
Must have answered everyone's questions, which is
I
a good
think I
sign,
have.
maybe, I hope.
Yeah.
I think you have, Govinda, because I've got no questions in
Yeah.
chat or Q&A. So you've obviously done a fantastic job.
I'll take that.
My
Thanks for
final one, Govinda, would be there are plenty of attendees on this call that would well down the journey in compliance in terms of QEHS and are probably under ISO 27001. They may have 50,001 under the belt. For anybody who hasn't gone that far down the journey and they're maybe listening to some of the terms you're using around DLP and PII and SAS and all that good stuff and are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, realistically, what is their first step?
First step it's a gap analysis. Yeah, we sit down and we pull together every system, your supplier register. I always start with a vendor register because that tells me a story. And if I see 200 systems, I get a bit concerned and going, okay, if I see a good tech stack of 10 to 12 systems, then it's well governed. So I would say vendor management and then understanding from a supplier register and an information asset register. What does that mean? Understanding what data sits in each of those systems. And if you can put those two things together, you've got a very good framework to kind of build on documentation and so on.
Okay, brilliant. Well, Ian, I'm going to hand across to yourself. There's a couple of elements there from the IWFM team that support some additional information on top of everything that Govinda and his team can support your business with. But for just central information that IWFM can provide, Ian's going to walk you through that now over the next couple of slides.
Yeah, this isn't going to be quite as interesting as what has gone before, but hopefully you put up with me for this short period of time. Yeah, information management, good practice guide. It's on the website. There's a whole stack of stuff on the website, sometimes not as easy to find as you might want, but some really good stuff. So do have a look at that. It's a QR code there that you can just have a look through. Next slide, please, Derek. I'll rattle through these because it's not as exciting. The IWFM Academy, it's doing very well. We've got some new stuff coming through in 2026. So if you or any of your team are looking to do some stuff, introduction to facilities management, environmental sustainability, plus others that are coming through, right up to sort of level 6 courses, do scan the code and have a look to see what you or your team would be interested in. And next slide, please, Derek. Tech Survival Guide. It's e-learning episodes. They are literally 20-minute bite size. Not as in-depth or probably certainly not as qualified as Govinda, our last speaker, but they're a good starting point to get an idea on how some of this stuff works and how you can develop yourself more. And again, next slide, please. Supporting you as a member. To think about where you are in your membership, securing post nominals. I know that the Ireland Committee are a fantastically professional bunch, and a lot of them got sort of senior qualifications and their membership. So just think about how that may help you network your way to success. Link in and follow them. They do some great stuff on LinkedIn Ireland as well. Just give you a plug there, Derek, because it is interesting to see what you're up to, and you're doing great stuff. And that is the CPD number for today's event.
And then just on the socials piece, you can find us on X and you can find us on our newly updated LinkedIn. Haven't got a QR code, but you can find us. It's IWFM Ireland Region. If you search that on LinkedIn, you'd find us. And again, this has been recorded. IWFM will distribute this amongst members and hopefully we can get it up on our socials. Caroline and Govinda's details, so CG Business Consultant details will be in there. If anybody has any more in-depth questions that we can't answer for you, we would direct you towards the guys there and they can look after you. So at that, we're nearly at half one. So we're going to wrap it up. Thanks everybody again for your time and we look forward to seeing everybody either at our next networking event. So watch out on our socials for our next networking event or indeed our next Knowledge Share webinar across Ireland, and hopefully we'll have our Scottish and UK partners on that as well. Again, fantastic to see you guys. So thanks very much, and we'll wrap it up with that. Thank you.